I want to talk about Devin, who is the elephant in the room. If you're unfamiliar, it's a fully integrated environment that runs code, that has its own terminal, that has a little browser where it can find out how to use APIs and stuff like that. So lovely, so great. And I'm frustrated with it for two reasons. One is because that's callous, obviously. And the second is that it made me have to completely rewrite this script. So I want to talk about why up until now, developers didn't care that AI was stealing from them. So we're all familiar with the state of AI art, right? We all know about AI images and tools, and maybe we even know a thing or two about diffusion models or how they work, right? To the artist community, this has been a huge affront and a threat, and why shouldn't it be? So for decades, artists have just been posting cool work online, and then suddenly people upload all of that, and a tool trains on it and spits out cheap, imitative work without any kind of compensation to the artist. That's not equitable, right? But what about developers? I think the past decade and a half maybe has been a huge renaissance for software engineers. It's been a lauded profession, a really enviable job to be a software engineer. It's been a really good one. Heck, I made the jump. I was a cinematographer before I started doing little avatar people and making little videos. To be fair, there are some of them that are totally unhappy about AI, and I've met a few who are yeah, I don't care about this. I don't want this. I'm fine. But we've seen a different response from developers than we've seen from artists so far. So we've seen people who have had miles and miles of their code written and stolen to make things like Codex and ChatGPT and Microsoft's GitHub Copilot, Google, Anthropic. There are more companies to blame than just the ones you immediately think of. Everyone's kind of doing this. Everyone's getting in. Everyone's just ripping up code bases that they can find on the internet. Up until now, I didn't feel like coders particularly felt the same way about having that data trained as artists. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. First off, I think programmers feel a little bit different in their relationship to the work as artists. Programmers are problem solvers, but they're not necessarily directly manifesting their imagination. They're hitting errors and they got to work through them, and that's there's a process to it. And that's kind of a different thing. It's a little bit of a different skill set. A lot of programmers wouldn't say they're artists, and a lot of artists wouldn't say they're programmers. I think also, up until now, people have been kind of not upset about this because of the abstraction argument. So over the course of technology, we've made things easier and easier in terms of writing code and programming devices. Computers are weird, and it's very hard to tell them what to do without a lot of pre-existing stuff. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, right? So we made simpler and simpler kinds of code. We made assembly languages to write the machine code. We wrote programming language and compilers to create the assemblies. Then we wrote higher level stuff like Python and Lua and things that get compiled down from an even higher level of abstraction. Programming a mainframe in the 60s is super hard. Writing a Python script is easy. In fact, I see people say that writing in Python is basically writing in English. And that's not entirely incorrect. So what if AI is just a natural extension of that process, right? It's always getting easier all the time. And maybe we actually just want to use human language to program machines because no one needs to do any code writing. Maybe that's it. And honestly, heck, here's a screenshot. Here's John Carmack. This is the guy who brought you things like Quake and Doom, and he's talking about exactly that and how he thinks the natural human language could just be an extension of all of this abstraction work. He also kind of talks about the idea of managing teams of AI agents instead of human teams, because the ultimate abstraction, as he points out, is managing programmers and letting them write the code, right? Give the programmers the instructions. Or maybe Devin, but we'll get to that in a second. And the last reason I think programmers haven't been too worried about all of this or too upset or really thought that hard about it is discretion. So code is really hard to track, right? So who would ever know if I got something from Stack Exchange? How would they be sure that I didn't write that code myself? I think we've all jumped onto Stack Exchange and copied code, right? Especially when the chips were down and we were trying to figure something out. So who owns that code, right? Is it the person who wrote the help that they gave out on Stack Exchange for free? Because I don't think anyone's really bothered by anyone copying code from that and putting it into an existing code base. Someone did it to be helpful. How would anyone know? So by extension, how would anyone know if I copied code from ChatGPT. Like, it's also just being helpful and it's just spitting stuff out. And occasionally you can hit code walls where you don't know what to do. And it is really complicated. And it can save you a bunch of time. Like you could read a whole bunch of documentation, or you could be like, hey, ChatGPT, please give me this specific function that I need with this library. Like maintaining code bases is important. Most developers I know who are worth their salt are licensing out code if they're writing it. So they maintain control of the code base. It's important that you maintain the rights to everything you write. And I've seen a lot of people, especially talking about images, talk about how, someone made this Mid-Journey. They don't really own it because it's trained on all of everybody else's data. So why should they specifically own that? Especially if I could type in the same prompt or password, if you will, maybe prompts or passwords, and then I could just get the same exact thing out. So, is it the conversion? Is that copyrightable? Super messed up. So I've tried to avoid AI generated code just because I'm someone who's making games and selling stuff that I'm telling people I own. So I'd like to own it. Here's my last point, which I am really frustrated now when I'm reading back through my script, because this is the one that just gets dashed to smithereens. I wrote this week. Lastly, AI tools are made to be compatible with software developers. OpenAI, I think of as a company that is incredibly developer forwards. They have some really high profile engineers. You even have members of leadership who are tweeting about their code project that they're working on over the weekend. So when they're building stuff with tools like Copilot that they're building with Microsoft, with GitHub. Microsoft owns all of this, by the way. That's probably a whole other video, but Microsoft owns everything, including OpenAI's ass. Let's be real about that. All of this stuff that OpenAI is making feels pretty darn compatible with developers, right? And it's third parties who have been taking GPT and using it to do things like agents, right? It might be Gemini or it might be Claude or something, a competitor now that some of those are getting better, that is going into Devin. Because now we have to talk about Devin. Now they're just straight up replacing developers. First off, the thing about Devin that annoys the out of me so much is that it's just got the name of a guy. How instantly normalizing. Oh no, we have just we got Devin working on it, It's Devin, no problem. Haha, haha. There are so many people who have no idea what's going on in technology who be watching this video and be like, isn't this guy an AI? It's I'm a freaking VTuber. I've got this VTuber avatar. I'm a person who writes code. I write my own darn code, but eventually I could see a Devin model that absolutely has a 3D avatar that you talk to. Terrible. And I also just the smile on the CEO's face from Cognitive, this guy, the CEO from Cognitive. Look at this man's face. Look at this image. This is a guy who knows he's about to make a lot of money. Earlier, I was talking about how being a software developer is actually a really great thing. It's an awesome time to be a software developer. You know what makes being a software developer excellent? It pays pretty well. It pays pretty darn well. And so far in Silicon Valley, if you want to make a startup, you want to control your costs and you want to not really pay for too much. And you want to make things really lean and simple. You want to make a business that can make a product that's very viable. And your main cost, honestly, is just software people. It's people who can build your website, your front end, your back end, your iOS. All that stuff traditionally has been human developers. And honestly, it's pretty cheap in the scope of building global empires and stuff like that. A couple $1 million of costs that it takes to have a small to mid-sized team is nothing compared to what you can make if you actually get successful and you get acquired, or you come up with a hit product that actually is a revenue generator, which is, mostly not the case. Here's my point. I think there's something interesting about AI generated code. I'm not a hater, right? I have concerns, but I'm not oh, fuck this, everything's bad. But I do feel weird about selling it. I don't really feel great about hey, can this software just be generated from ex nihilo, from nothing, and just I have a full code base now? I don't love that. I also feel weird licensing something like that to someone if I really don't own it. It's that's kind of fraudulent. I currently do a lot of my work in a visual scripting language. So I honestly, I could not upload that code base into an AI if I wanted to right now. That kind of data just isn't there, doesn't exist yet. A lot of the files I work with day to day are actually binaries. So Devin can't mess with my files. I don't think they're set up to do that yet. I mean, look, I see the writing on the wall. I know where everything's going. I'm wondering what kind of resistance we're going to see to this, because most people aren't interested in their own extinction, right? If everyone just pays let's say $60 a month for Devin, and they downloaded Devin, and it makes their website, and it makes their app, and it makes their product, what are all the devs gonna do? Are we just gonna sit in our basements and reprogram Atari games from scratch or something like that. Like, have a nice time. Maybe we'll become dentists.